Hey everyone, welcome to My Rising Rose with me, Jack Morrigan. At My Rising Rose, we are dedicated to channeling interdimensional beings, goddesses and dragons, and expanding our consciousness into ever higher and deeper states of being, while living as ordinary human beings, while integrating this expanded spiritual knowledge into the messiness and triviality and painfulness of our ordinary humanity. And today that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about the spiritual depths of our personal pain. And I come from a tradition and a spiritual lineage, although I'm not part of any formal religion or spiritual school. I was a senior student to Fran Bennett, who herself was a Christian monastic for over 20 years, and also she was also a Buddhist monastic for a period of time, and was a teacher in the lineage of Adyashanti. She was taught by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who was the principal teacher of the Dalai Lama. And she was, more than any of that, she was an ordinary human being. And my greatest teachings from her were always connected to the authenticity of her life and my life and all of our human lives. And she isn't with us anymore. She died a couple of years ago. And before I found out that she had died, I would receive visitations from her spirit where she would anoint me, where she would put, like the Christians sometimes will put a little sacred oil on the third eye as a blessing. And she would do that, and I had this sense that she was blessing me and passing something on to me and telling me that I was ready to start teaching. But then I found out that she had died, and that made sense to me, and I feel like I'm one of the people who's carrying on her lineage, which is connected to the lineages of Christian monasticism, Buddhist monasticism, Tibetan Buddhism, and all of those things. And as her student, I want to carry on her primary message, which was the message of personal authenticity. And so I want to share with you about my pain and my struggle, and to use that as a vehicle for your own acceptance of your pain, of your ordinary humanity, so that you can realize the true liberatory depths of personal suffering. So, any of you who have been following me for a while know that my childhood was difficult. I haven't gone into huge lengths about that. One of the reasons is because I've mostly forgiven the people who did that to me, and I have a lot of love for them, and I don't want to be creating a kind of messy or toxic situation where there's a lot of blame, because I understand that my parents and my siblings were abusive and neglectful to me because of the abuse and neglect that they received. And I understand that their souls incarnated into these lifetimes for the growth of consciousness. So there's a great nobility to each of them and a great love within each of them and their actions, even if they weren't conscious of it. However, that said, the way I was treated when I was a child did leave me predisposed to suffer later in life. So just a brief summary, like when I was born, I nearly died. I was taken to an emergency situation like I couldn't breathe. And I was taken away from my mother during that time. Obviously, I don't have direct memories of that, but I think it's left a emotional imprint that life is dangerous and that I can be abandoned. And then when I was growing up, I experienced more pain and abandonment, physical pain and abandonment, because both of my parents were physically abusive, and my sister was also physically abusive to me. I was the youngest of 4 children. So in a family where people really were not emotionally healthy and had so many wounds and so many needs, but there was no one there who was healed enough and responsible enough and aware enough to hold any of that. So everybody's in pain, everyone's screaming out to be seen and heard, no one's receiving it, and it's true of the children and the adults. So there's all this pain, it's not being held, and then what's happening is people are just having emotional outbursts, which includes physically assaulting each other, and then there's no space for emotional nurturing. So for me, I didn't have anyone to turn to. If I had a problem, there was no one who felt safe and responsible to hold that problem for me, even as a very young child. So I just shouldered all of those burdens. And I was also frequently physically hit and emotionally abandoned. So it was common that I would be hit, shouted at, and then left. So that, there are many ways that physical abuse can happen. Sometimes it happens in families where there's like a physical hit and then there's an explanation of what happened and why. So there's an adult there who is explaining to the child why they lashed out at them. There's some kind of explanation, maybe holding afterwards, some kind of care. So I didn't receive that. I experienced physical assault and then emotional abandonment. And what I think that has done is predisposed me in deep ways, held in my body, so not even so much in my mind. I'm talking about somatic energies held in my body that are linked to people being very unsafe, people being very unpredictable, untrustworthy, and unsafe. So that makes navigating life as an adult really difficult. Like, it's hard to navigate life because life is so built on relationships, and building and maintaining those relationships is so difficult when this kind of childhood and birth trauma exists. And I know some of you will feel that. For some of you, I might be articulating something that you've been experiencing your whole life that nobody's put words to, or maybe you have heard about this, you have read about this, and hearing it through me is just reminding you of this. And what I'm hoping is that by me articulating this, it's bringing consciousness to a part of life that is difficult, a part of life that generally we prefer to turn away from, whether we've experienced it or not. And I'd really like to share this with people who haven't experienced this. Like, honestly, you have no idea how lucky you are. You have no idea. Because generally speaking, these types of wounds that I'm talking to you about, people do not express them. They don't share that it's happened to them. They may have forgotten or buried it, even though it still rules their life. And as my ex-partner once described it, it's like there's an invisible bullet inside us who have been through these experiences. And then we're trying to compete with and kind of be like a normal person, someone who hasn't gone through this. But we've got an invisible bullet inside our leg and we're limping. and it's really difficult for us to run, and it's really difficult for us to keep up pace with other people. And those people don't know that. They aren't aware. Like, for myself, like, people around me were not aware of what I was going through. I didn't even consider telling anyone. Like, it didn't even cross my mind to tell anyone what I was experiencing at home. And I don't know why. I think I thought it was normal. I think I just thought that that's what everybody experienced. And so there was no reason to ever talk about it. And I didn't even talk about it to friends of mine. I've barely spoken to anyone about it. I talk publicly about it a little bit, and I've had therapy, but there was no sense of it being bad or wrong. And, and that in many ways has left me pretty messed up as an adult, even though I've done a lot of healing work. The fact that I'm able to articulate this and remain very coherent and calm is a part of that. But yesterday I went through a few different events that really triggered that old wound. It really brought it to the surface. And it was very intense and painful. And I want to articulate this because, honestly, I don't have much respect for spiritual teachers who act like they are not experiencing these things on any level, or just do not talk about their personal experience and the hardship that they go to. To be completely honest, I don't respect people like that, because I actually see that as a form of deceit. To me, that's what it is. Like, to present yourself as if you are above the human condition, when in reality, as I've found out in seeing past the curtain and the facade for many well-known spiritual teachers who do act like this, through knowing people who know them or organize their events or whatever it is, I've heard so many stories of these people just like having emotional meltdowns when they're off stage, and then presenting themselves as if they're completely beyond any of that when they're on stage. And I honestly just see it as deceitful and manipulative, because you're presenting a form of spiritual awakening that people will not experience, and earning a lot of money from it, from selling people the belief that they will somehow completely transcend all human suffering. On the other side of that, I've got a lot of respect for teachers who actually talk about their humanity, and there's lots out there who do, and I've got a lot of time for those people, and my teacher was one of them, and some of the people who she was very close to and who she taught alongside were like that too. So that's really the kind of role models that I've seen coming through the spiritual scene, where I saw more and more of the fakeness in some teachers and moved away from them, and I saw more and more of the authenticity in others and moved towards them, and ended up becoming, like I said, a senior student to one of those teachers. And when I say senior student, all I really mean is like we had a really close relationship, and we would talk regularly, and I was considered part of the inner circle of her teachings. I'm just emphasizing that because sometimes people will be like, "Oh, I was a student of blah blah blah," and then it's like there are many levels of being a student, right? There's the level of I've read a book by a teacher who's long dead and consider myself a student of their teachings, which is fair enough. Like that's a type of student, it's kind of further out. And then you can get closer, like you could actually receive teachings from someone directly. So there are people who, using Adyashanti as an example, he doesn't do very much one-on-one teaching, and he stopped teaching altogether now, I think. But he would do big events, and people would go to those events and they'd read his books and they'd be like, I am his teacher of Adyashanti. I am a student, sorry, of Adyashanti. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, you've been to that person's live events, but you haven't actually really interacted one-on-one with this person very much. And then you could actually be in a formal teacher-student relationship with someone, but not interact that much or go that deep. And then you could be like a kind of a closer or deeper student. So I would say that's the kind of relationship that I had with Fran. Like, we were close, and it was a deep relationship. I mean, it could have been closer. Like, she lived on the other side of the world, so we didn't see each other in person very much. We would basically just have calls, online calls, like once a month. And I think 3 times we met in person when she was doing retreats in the UK and I went. So that, just to give, and like the time scale, that was like on and off over about 5 years. There was a period of a year or 2 where I stopped contacting her because I had gone into some kind of spiritual ego thing where I pushed her away. And then after about, I think it was a year, after about a year of not being in touch with her, I was in a really bad place, and I reached out to her, and then she took me on again as her student. So, and then we were close then after that. So that was over about a 5-year period. And I just want to put that in some kind of, I want to express that and put that in a context, because, you know, I've seen famous teachers who will put an image of like a super famous, well-respected master behind them. And then I find out that they actually only spent a weekend with that person. You know, and they're making out like they're this proper devotee of this teacher, and actually it's a bit of a marketing plan. So, you know, one of the things that I want to do with these videos is to really help people ground and to see through some of the manipulation that happens within the spiritual scene. So that's why I'm saying all this stuff and being transparent about my relationship with my teacher and how deep that was, and the kind of limitations of it, you know, in that I wasn't seeing her a huge amount in person. So going back to the topic of suffering, right? So I had a lot of triggers of my childhood wounds yesterday. And I won't go into the details of kind of what that was triggered or why that was triggered, just because that involves other people. But, you know, so this is a little bit of a teaching as well, you know, because sometimes if we get into therapeutic spheres or personal healing, kind of self-help worlds, we can start going into like these oversharing places where we're not respecting our boundaries or other people's boundaries, and we need to find a balance between those things. So I see that as a balance between wisdom and love. So wisdom is like the truth, so saying things that are true, but also having love there, so considering how this can impact other people. So with regard to my family, for example, what I'm sharing, my birth name isn't the same as my current name, or my name, Morrigan. So I see that as there's like a kind of element of protection there for them. I want them to have some kind of anonymity, and that's a good thing, right? It means I can still be truthful and express about what happened to me in ways that are healing for me and healing for other people, and being transparent and authentic. And I'm also still respecting other people and respecting them and what they've been through, and allowing them to have their own journey with all of that. And so I'm wanting to do the same thing with this situation. I don't want to go into lots of detail about what happened and why. I just want to say that some things came up related to relationships for me that evoked my childhood wounds. And those wounds are really intense for me. And, speaking about the way that I was born, how I couldn't breathe, and that then I experienced this abuse and neglect in childhood and abandonment. So sometimes situations will arise in my life where I'm not being abandoned, but it will evoke that feeling. And my body goes into an emotional response, emotional memory response. So I start reliving the emotional memories that I had at that time, which are still stored in my body. And to me, it's like I am being abandoned literally in that moment, and I'm reliving all of that pain. And it's difficult to remain clear in a situation like that and not start projecting the past onto the people that I'm close to and onto the situation. It requires a lot of consciousness to not do that, and it requires being connected to people who are also conscious and can understand what's happening. So I was able to articulate what was happening to the people involved. So there's like a clarity there. Saw myself going into this wounded place, and if I'm going into a wounded place and I feel like I'm being attacked or threatened, then it can feel like a justification to be angry and mean and hostile in response to that, and I'm a human being, so I can be like that. I can be angry and mean and hostile. I'm not saying that I hit anyone, I don't do that, but I can have that kind of meanness. Like it's, I've got a lot of Scorpio in me as well, and if any of you know about Scorpio, there's like the sting in the tail, right? But it's something that I'm conscious of. It's something that I'm conscious of, and something that I really want to articulate as a spiritual teacher, because having anger as a spiritual teacher is often seen as this absolute no-no, like you are not allowed that. And if you have that, then you are completely bad and wrong. And what that does, that belief, what that does is it pressures teachers to not reveal their true emotional experience. So they'll be more likely to hide it. Like I can feel that pressure in myself now. I can feel this pressure to I don't want to reveal this to people because people are going to judge you for this. I'm afraid you are going to judge me for this, that you will see me as an inauthentic or not a true spiritual teacher. Oh, he hasn't transcended his anger. He hasn't integrated his anger, right? But the irony there is that literally what I am doing right now is integrating my anger, right? By expressing it honestly. And the sensitive among you will know that I'm in an altered energetic state right now. So my consciousness is expanded. So what I'm doing is I'm holding my field of awareness in and beyond my body, so that the knots of anger and pain that still exist in my body are felt and released and integrated. And some of you will be feeling this resistance to that and a desire to kind of close me down in some way, which is kind of ironic, because what I'm doing is actually the healing of those wounds in myself. And by being honest about this, that extends that to you too. It normalizes the shadows, the underworld of human experience, so that you and I can relax. And, in the context of my profession as a spiritual teacher, it's really important that I remain honest and open about these experiences. So I felt myself going into that place. I could feel this kind of angry, tense sort of no quality inside of myself. and was just feeling it kind of bubbling up, like I could feel it a little bit in my words, like it was just slightly coloring my words, like there was just a harshness in what I was saying, and I could feel that. And then I noticed it and like took a step back for a second, reminded myself that I've been in this place before, that these emotions they're not true. It's a memory from the past. I don't have to go down this road. I know that it doesn't end well when I do. So being conscious enough to step back and go, okay. And then to express that. So I'm talking to someone on the phone and then I'm expressing that to them, like, oh, hold on. I can see what's happening. I can see what's happening. This is what's happening inside of me. You know, and then I can't remember exactly what I said. It's hard to remember these things when it's like kind of emotionally charged, but having enough consciousness to pull back, and for the person I was talking to have enough consciousness that they're not getting really triggered by it, and we're able to talk and negotiate, and we know where we're at, you know, and it didn't boil over into anything like harmful, and actually from my side has built more trust between myself and this person, because I know that I can be in triggered negative states with them, and it's not going to be the end of the world, you know. So it built a lot of trust, and of course that I didn't have a lot of trust in people. In fact, that could be the core of this wound, a lack of trust in people and a lack of trust in life also. But then moving on to like the spiritual side of things, well first of all, like after I was on the phone call with them, I was laying on my bed and I just felt these waves of freezing cold energy moving through my body, which I know as my body feeling trauma, it's processing trauma in that moment. I'm feeling it's hot here at the moment. I feel it's hot here in Berlin. I'm not used to the temperature. I'm from colder places. So for me to feel really cold at this time of year is unusual. And it was like a cold coming up from my body. It's like the thawing of the ice of the underworld within me. And for me to thaw that, I have to feel it on some level. It has to move through me. So that's what was happening, like this freezing cold feeling and shaking, like my body shaking. And being completely exhausted. And just laying on my bed and just sort of being in this strange altered state. And then having horrible nightmares for like the first half that I was sleeping during the night. Then getting some good sleep, and then feeling pretty crap in the morning, just like with this kind of hangover of the feeling. And then going to a local cafe and sitting there and having a coffee and being able to really accept the depths of suffering that is within me, and feeling that. I was actually responding to some of the comments on these videos, and doing it from this very open state of non-resistance, of acceptance of everything. Like, what I find is that this heaviness of suffering can cause us to go into states of resistance. I could see in my mind me blaming people for how I was feeling, and then choosing to let go of that and just allow myself to feel what I was feeling. And actually responding to your comments helped, because I could see a kind of similarity. And when I respond to your comments, I'm usually doing it from a place of spirit. It's like it's my spirit that is, I say my spirit, it's really our spirit that's responding through me. And the answers that it gives are often good for the person, it's good for you, but it's for me too. It's for my humanity. Like, I'm not somehow above that advice. So I'm looking at the words that have just been typed through me, and then tears are coming to my eyes because I realize the advice that I'm giving is totally appropriate to my own situation and my own suffering in this moment. The analogy that came up a lot was the Jesus story and the cross. So Jesus carried the cross, and he was tortured on the cross, and he died on the cross. He suffered the weight, the burden of his suffering. He endured it, but he endured it with grace. So he made use of the transformative power of his own burden, his own suffering, his own cross, his own crucifixion. He made use of that suffering in order to create his own resurrection, his own liberation. And that, recalling that, helped me to enter a state of something similar with the much easier situation that I was working through. I wasn't I'm not trying to say that if I was being tortured that I would be able to find that same place. Maybe I would. I honestly, I wouldn't put it past me, but I'm not going to make that claim or compare myself to Jesus, because that's, I don't want to go down that road. But I do relate to the story, and I am sharing it with you because there are ways for you to relate to that story too. You have your suffering that you carry. You have your burden and your cross. And in your own way, each and every day, you go through your many crucifixions. And then the question is, how do you relate to that? In what way do you relate to your crucifixion? In what way do you relate to your suffering? Do you resist it? Do you try and push it away? Do you put it on someone else as if they're the true cause of it, or try and make it someone else's burden to carry? Or do you allow yourself to feel the full crushing weight of the cross and let it fall on your heart and shatter the barriers, the armor around your heart that you think keeps you safe, but really is the cause of your suffering? So do you allow the suffering of your cross to shatter the true suffering of your disconnection from your heart, of your disconnection from God, if we're using the Christian story? So it's obviously better if I teach you with direct, like I believe that I'm here to be a role model. So it's important that I show you me doing the things that I'm talking about. Me doing the things that I'm advising you to do. Right, so in this moment, I'm surrendering to the weight of my suffering. I'm feeling it. And by feeling it, I'm being liberated from it. So it's not a liberation where I'm trying to escape my suffering. I'm not being liberated because I'm trying to be liberated. I'm not moving away from suffering. I'm moving toward suffering. I'm relaxing and letting go. So the light of my spirit touches the suffering of my humanity. The light of my being, the presence of my being, meets the pain of my humanness. And then they're working together. And then I'm being released. Right, so that's like being a human being.